Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Darren, and a lot of you guys requested for me to compare or contrast all three specs of rogues for PvP. Now, you don't really need a scientist to see which spec is obviously the better one for PvP, but I will go over all three specializations for the patch of 7.2.5. Now with patch 7.2.5, we actually had a lot of updates, and I feel that it made all three specs of rogue more viable, or made them actually viable when they were prior not as viable before. And a lot of the changes are great. Most of these changes are minor, but some are major that change the specialization in so many ways that we did not even predict it. And after playing the patch 7.2.5 for a few weeks now, being able to test it all three specs for PvP at different varieties of levels, I feel like I am qualified to make this kind of video. There's a lot of changes that happen, and you definitely should check out all three specs of rogues when it comes to adjusting to changes. Let's say somebody wants to try rogue, or somebody coming back to rogue from a previous expansion or a previous patch. I get a lot of comments of people telling me that, hey, I'm coming back from a previous patch, what's going on, what should I play, how should I build, whatnot. So you definitely should take a look at this in detail, but this video is going to go over the basics of what the specs are like in patch 7.2.5. This video is going to outline what they currently are good at and what is the viability in 7.2.5 PvP. And then afterwards, I'll rate the specializations in terms of viability, probably the best to worst for PvP, even though I don't think any of the specs are worst, but they do have a hierarchy that they do naturally develop. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on to the video. The first specialization on the chopping block is, by alphabetical order, Assassination. Some of the changes that happened to Assassination are as follows. First of all, they got Toxic Blade, which is an awesome talent all on its own. Toxic Blade is such a good addition to the game. It does replace a talent that was prior really good for PvE, but it replaces a boring passive ability with an exciting active one, and allows for PvP players to actually have a useful ability instead of going for straight up alacrity, because no one really uses Sanguinate. Toxic Blade on its own literally makes this spec a lot stronger. It allows you a little bit more fun lineups, it throws you an extra ability to use in rotation, it deals solid damage, it generates a common point, it plays on a poison aspect of the game. So if you always want to play a poison based Assassination Rogue, which is the point of playing Assassinations, to be a poison master, well then Toxic Blade lets you do that, which I find a ton of fun. Assassination also has Deadly Burst. Like when you have all your cooldowns available, your Vendetta, your Toxic Blade, your Artifact Weapon, the Envenoms, maybe even Stuns, all the bleeds and dots in the world. There's so many healers and other classes that can actually live through your burst. You are deadly once you have everything lined up, and what happens with the Deadly Burst is all the cooldowns that you have are on a fairly short cooldown. Your Vendetta can be used quite often, your Artifact Weapon can be used quite often, hell, even Toxic Blade is only 25-second cooldown, so you'll be seeing yourself bursting on players a lot more often than you would, let's say you're playing Outlaw Rogue or a Warrior. Your cooldowns are just that short. You also have good defensives for the sake of mobility, which is kind of lacking compared to the other two specializations. In no way am I saying that Assassination has bad mobility. In fact, it has a pretty average mobility, but instead of having two shadow steps like a Subtlety Rogue, or even have a grappling hook mobility of an Outlaw Rogue, instead you get a stacking defensive buff with your Crimson Vial. So when you find yourself in a situation where you don't really find yourself in the best placement, and you're just, let's say, getting bursted by a plethora of classes, be you getting bombarded by shamans, mages, warriors, you name it, by using Crimson Vial, you're able to hold yourself steady, giving yourself a buff which does need to take a bit of stacking, so you will have to find ways to learn how to pre-pot yourself, so then you can actually build up the stacks and combine that with Feint. You can actually, while finding yourself in bad situations, be really ballsy, push in, and then survive a lot of the onslaught without having to pop a lot of your cooldowns, which makes it for an interesting fair play and a fair trade when it comes to playing Assassination in terms of trade-off for the abilities. Instead of having the same mobility, instead you have defensives that you can use and need to kind of pre-pot and pre-use ahead of time, almost expecting your enemy and reading their every move, which kind of feel like works out for the specialization. You also have damage over time, and how many classes in the game have strong damage over time capability? Assassination is one of the specs that currently in patch 7.2.5 actually has a pretty decent DPS capability with dots alone, so being able to multi-dot multiple enemies is actually worth, even though most of your damage still does come from being able to plant yourself and stick on one target like a tumor on a forehead. You are able to still spread damage, spread dots, and have more than one playstyle, whether you want to be more spread pressure, or maybe you just want to be trainable when you just want to sit on one target and train him into the ground. You also have awesome AoE capability, and with the patch 7.5 as well as patch 7.2, there were a few changes adjusted for Assassination in particular, so then you actually have a little bit of variety of playstyles. AoE Spec is a build that is fun and is awesome, and it basically converts your rotation from mutilates into Phantom Knives, being able to hit as many targets as you can, and the more people that stack in your Phantom Knives, the more people you're going to hit them and the harder you're going to hit them, which makes it, I feel like, for a very, very fun playstyle and gives a little bit of variety to what Assassination needed. Instead of being all about trading down single target, now you can go in an RBG, even random battleground, hell, even 3's arenas, and put a lot of pressure on more than one target, something Assassination couldn't really do prior. Well, the thing about this specialization is it is pretty straightforward to play, and that I mean in a good way and a bad way. The good way of playing Assassination, the fact that it's so straightforward, is it's fairly simple to pick up. You maintain your dots, you maintain your poisons, you learn how you do your rotation for the burst lineup. That's really about it. And then from there, you kind of just chill. But because that's all you really get to do as Assassination, because your playstyle is so straightforward, there's no real tricks behind the sleeve here. You really kind of are an open book. But you are a strong open book. Think of yourself more not really a novel with twists and turns and unexpected climaxes. You're really basically a manual. You're helping somebody achieve a goal of killing an enemy target through a car manual style process instead of a very exciting mysterious novel. Alrighty, now the next specialization on the chopping block is Outlaw, the specialization that I have been maining this whole time in Legion. It's a pirate-themed specialization, which I feel like I should probably cover first of all, which is really cool. It has all the piratey themes, Cannibal Barrage, literally think Jack Sparrow in World of Warcraft. It's all very exciting. The buff mechanic of an Outlaw Rogue, while has some drawbacks and the community has told me and beaten to my head about the RNG being so bad, the buffs are a very exciting mechanic overall and give a variety to your playstyle. Your rotation changes based on what buffs you have, so you're never going to really use same abilities back to back to back. You're always going to do something different. You're going to flip-flop and you're going to try new things here and there. And that's part of the fun of Outlaw, is the buffs basically make it so that your rotation is never the same, which gives you a little bit of excitement and keeps you on your toes, which I personally enjoy. You have massive burst damage. Now, this without talking about subtlety burst damage, as an Outlaw you have massive burst damage. It takes a little bit more skill in 7.5 to land up because of the changes to our energy regeneration, which supposedly feels smoother, but when it comes to burst, sometimes it can feel a little bit lacking if you don't really know how to do it properly. But the burst damage itself is insane, and when enemies trinket, they're basically a free meal for you as long as you can get your lineups right. So that's something definitely to watch out when it comes to playing Outlaw. You have the legendary 5 buff God mode. It used to be a 6 buff, but now they changed to 5 buffs. Even if they did take out one of the buffs that you might be able to get in your 5 buff combo, it still feels so goddamn godly. Once you have 5 buffs, you literally are Reaper on the open field, just stunning people left and right, and I made a video on that before, which is hilarious. You also have Tricks of the Trade, which is one of the things that rogues basically are slowly gaining little by little. Subtlety got introduced Tricks of Trade in this patch back as an ability that you can actually use within arenas in PvP. But this is one of the specializations that still maintains Tricks of the Trade, and the capabilities for 50% buff to you, not only yourself, but also to the damage of a friendly target. So if you decide to play maybe, I don't know, with a Fury Warrior, Enhancement Shaman, maybe even a Demon Hunter, you could buff yourself and them by 50% worth of damage and just watch the fireworks fly. The damage burst you provide in the arena is pretty awesome. You also have fairly weak sustained damage. That is one thing that I'll say about Outlaw Rogue for PvP. They did try to fix it a little bit with the change of how buffs work and make your energy regeneration a little bit more sustained based, but your energy regeneration still doesn't help you get any more sustained capability, which is completely fine because Outlaw Rogue has a massive burst, so having sustained damage isn't really that much of an issue, but it is kind of an issue when you're looking at the other specializations where you're seeing Assassination has good sustained damage, and so does Subtlety, where Outlaw is kind of falling behind on that aspect. That's definitely something to consider. You also have not a lot of talent variety. While I've been playing Outlaw since only the Legion started, my talents haven't really changed much. They're not really introducing too many different aspects of Outlaw, and they're not really changing too much when it comes to our talents, which I hope that they would eventually, but they still haven't, and I'm still hoping Blizzard changes a few things to maybe give us a little bit more variety. But the talents I'm rolling currently are basically the talents that I've been rolling since the beginning of the patch. So if you're looking for a class with a lot of variety, this isn't the kind of class that you're going to get it with. Now finally, the best for last, Subtlety. And when I say best for last, if you haven't seen the patch changes for 7.25, holy crap, you haven't been living. I feel like everybody who has played Subtlety back in Kata, Mob, hell even WoD are rejoicing because you get to play Subtlety in the way it was meant to be played. Bursty. All about watching out for your energy, watching out for your combo points, really monitoring your resources, being able to make lineups great again instead of just, sitting there spamming Shadow Strike, which was fun, but eventually it looks like it's the same. You get the same experience of watching paint dry. It becomes very repetitive and not as satisfying. You have so much variety with Subtlety in terms of your talents, and I'm still playing around with a lot of talents. Recently I got to play some arenas and I picked some very questionable talents just for kicks and giggles, and to my surprise, which I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, they were owning. The damage it was producing is actually insane, and it is straight up hilarious. So with a variety of different playstyles, you can actually almost play whatever build you want with Subtlety in most PvP situations, as long as they're not, I guess, really of that high gladiator range level. Everything should be just about acceptable. Like if you go into random BG, I'm pretty sure you can play your playstyle and you can actually make it work, as I've seen myself happen before. You have amazing burst, you have amazing control, you have good self-sustained damage, of course depending how you pick your build, but you don't really have a choice of both control and burst. You can choose how much burst and how much control you want, but it really comes to one way or the other. Do you want a lot more burst and you can literally go every single talent for damage, or do you want more control and sustainability, so you're kind of pulling the other way? You can't really have best of both worlds, but you can find a fairly good middle ground, and that's part of the customization of your own build. You can find the build that works for you and deals the damage you want it to, which is awesome because it feels like it's been a while since we actually had a specialization that could do that so well. That's why I'm so excited about patch 7.25 Subtlety changes. They did nerf your mobility. Instead of just spamming your Shadow Strike for mobility, now they give you 2 charges of Shadow Dance, which I believe provides a little bit more of player skill, because you have to be more selective on who you Shadow Step to and how to use them properly, instead of just, targeting the healer and just spamming Shadow Strike until they eventually die and rage quit because they cannot get away from you, which I am pretty happy with, but a lot of people have expressed concerns in terms of mobility. I think it's fine, but to each is their own. They also have a big playstyle change in 7.25. As I said earlier, you went from a watching paint dry to a really exciting playstyle, but a lot of people get used to the Subtlety playstyle where your Nightblade was a third of your damage, your Shadow Strikes was another third of your damage, and then your Eviscerates were a third of your damage. They never really had like full lineup bursts. You didn't really have like crits for 100, for like millions like you currently have right now. You really just had a fair balance between Shadow Strikes dealing decent damage, Eviscerates dealing decent damage, which fed back into your Shadow Dancer, which fed back into your Shadow Strikes, maintaining Nightblade, which was a third of your damage, and that's all fine and dandy. But to me personally, I like the new playstyle change, or at least the revert to the old school playstyle change, which is what we should really call it, because that's what Subtlety used to be about. It used to be about big bursts, it used to be about big lineups, it used to be about going bigly, and that's what I like about it. But some people do express concern with it, so if you're somebody who played it in patch before 7.25 and you like that change to Subtlety, you actually like that playstyle, then it will definitely be a while to adjust to, but I think your adjustments will be worth because of the burst. Now it's finally time to rate all the 3 specializations of Rogue for the PvP spectrum to figure out which one is the best, and I feel like it's fairly easy to see that Outlaw is... I'm joking. I can't do it with a straight face. Subtlety is the best. Subtlety is the best specialization, because you have so much variety, you have so much reliable damage, you have reliable CC, you have reliable mobility, and a playstyle change that a lot of people can relate to, plus a variety of different cooldowns that you can grab and different talents that you can pick from to really customize your playstyle to suit your needs, allowing a lot more flexibility while keeping the spec fairly sustainable. That means there's only a few talents that you can grab to really reduce your effectiveness. Most of the talents increase your effectiveness as long as you use them properly, which makes the Subtlety specialization a lot stronger. It gives you control when you need it, gives you burst when you need it, and allows you to play the playstyle you want to play. And I feel like the burst damage and the lineups are very exciting. On the second row, which I won't put too far away from Subtlety, is Assassination. It is a solid spec and it deals a lot of damage, but because it is a straightforward playstyle, it doesn't have a lot of room to grow like a Subtlety. And it also kind of lacks mobility compared to Subtlety, which can sometimes put you in awkward situations, but it still is a good strong spec, and it definitely should be a cornerstone spec for a lot of starter rogues to try out, and then maybe move on to Subtlety. And finally, in the third spot, we have Outlaw. Now, I wouldn't really want to put Outlaw that further away from Assassination, but the spec does have its issues. While it is my favorite specialization, it is difficult for me to not look at it in an objective manner and say, yeah, it's the best specialization ever. It can be if you understand the playstyle. It is difficult to play, it is difficult to pick up, but if you like difficulty, then I feel like Outlaw might be the spec for you. So if you have some real hair on your chest, maybe check out Outlaw, but I feel like Subtlety on the spectrum that we're talking on right now is probably the strongest out of the 3 specs of Rogue. Well, this about covers everything that I wanted to do in terms of rating and applying the specializations on different spectra for PvP to find out which spec is going to be ultimately the best. Let me know what you guys thought about this video, and let me know what you thought about my listing and whether you agree with it or not. And if you disagree with it, how would you rank specs of Rogue differently? Do you think Assassination Rogue taking the spot? Maybe even some of you think that Outlaw has some hidden potential that is yet to be unlocked. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.